But I think everyone in this band and people who have been and gone, so to speak, have passed through Fleetwood Mac.
Mick Fleetwood turned 78 this year. For decades, he kept the darkest secrets of Fleetwood Mac locked away. But now he's finally talking. The affairs that destroyed friendships. The cocaine that cost him $60 million. The betrayal that made Stevie Nicks ban someone from the studio. In March 2025, something happened that shocked everyone. Mick and Lindsey Buckingham were back in the studio together. What they discussed wasn't just music. It was the truth about what really tore the band apart and why Stevie might never forgive him. Mick Fleetwood was born on June 24, 1947 in Redruth, Cornwall. His father was a Royal Air Force wing commander, which meant Mick was raised in a world shaped by constant movement and military discipline. Even though he was born in peaceful England, his early years were anything but quiet. Just 2 years after World War II, Britain was still recovering and Mick's family was always being transferred. By the time Mick was 4, the family had moved to Egypt. For the next 6 years, they lived through events like the Egyptian Revolution in 1952 and the Suez Crisis in 1956. Mick lived the culture every day. He picked up the sounds, the rhythm, and the atmosphere of a land completely different from England. These years gave him an unconscious connection to non-Western music, especially percussion. Long before he became a drummer, he had already internalized the complex beats and layered sounds of Egyptian street music. That influence would quietly resurface years later in the way he played. After Egypt, his family relocated again, this time to Norway. Mick was around 10 years old. His father had been assigned there through NATO. Mick enrolled in local schools and learned to speak fluent Norwegian. Though he later forgot the language, his full immersion shaped how he adapted to new environments. Norway's long winters and dramatic light patterns added something else to his view of the world. He began to understand mood and space in a different way. That understanding later came through in his music, especially in how he created atmosphere with rhythm. The isolation of Norway also made him more self-reliant and gave him a comfort with silence that most kids never learn. School, however, was a struggle. Mick had severe dyslexia and it left him frustrated and misunderstood. He failed tests even though he was clearly bright and creative. Teachers were often confused. He knew the answers but couldn't memorize anything in the traditional way. He once broke down crying under a tree, asking God to get him out of that place. At 13, his parents gave him a drum kit, a small set made by Gigster. That gift changed everything. He taught himself to play in the attic, practicing to Everly Brothers and Cliff Richard records. With no formal training, Mick developed a natural instinctive approach. What started as therapy became a calling. Creativity ran through his family. His father wrote poetry and played drums for fun. His sister Susan became an actress and his other sister Sally explored sculpture. Mick was part of that same creative stream. When he was 12, he built a fake nightclub in a barn behind their house in Gloucester. He called it Club Keller. He set up lights, made a stage, and imagined it full of people. Years later, he opened a real venue in Maui called Fleetwood's on Front Street. And he traced the idea directly back to that barn. That childhood fantasy wasn't just pretend. It was a vision. He already understood that music was about creating a world people could step into. At 15, Mick dropped out of school. He was failing and miserable. His family surprisingly supported the decision. They believed in him, especially after seeing how he'd connected with music. They bought him a better drum kit and he moved to London to chase the dream. He didn't have a car, but he bought a second-hand taxi. It became his band van. People started hiring him not just because he could play, but because he showed up with real drums and could transport them himself. That made him valuable. He slept on the floor of his sister Sally's place in Notting Hill and started inserting himself into the local scene. Things started moving fast. Within a year of arriving in London, a musician named Peter Bardens, who lived just a few doors away, offered him a gig. Bardens needed a drummer for his band, the Cheney. It was 1963 and Mick was only 16. Almost immediately, they were opening for acts like the Rolling Stones and the Yardbirds. They even appeared in a short film in 1965 called Mods and Rockers, where a young-haired Mick can be seen drumming. He had officially entered the world of rock and roll, and he hadn't even turned 18 yet. After that, he joined the Bow Street Runners in 1966. The band had already won a major contest 2 years earlier on a TV show called Ready Steady Win, a competition designed to discover the next Beatles. They had scored a recording contract and $1,000 in prize money. Their single, I'm a Bow Street Runner, had sold over $20,000 copies. When Mick joined, they were still riding that success. But bad luck struck when they released a promising follow-up single that was expected to climb the charts. A workers' strike at the record pressing plant meant only a small number of copies were made. The song stalled and the momentum faded. For Mick, though, it was another step forward. Then came the turning point. In April 1967, he got a chance to audition for John Mayall and the Bluesbreakers. The band was the heart of Britain's blues scene, and it was a huge opportunity. Mick was terrified during the audition, but he landed the job. He was now playing with top-tier musicians, including bassist John McVie. The two became close. But the good times didn't last. Mick's drinking got out of control and he was eventually fired for showing up drunk to gigs. Still, the experience gave him something no school ever could. Mole's band was like a blues university. Mick was learning from the greats, absorbing everything from John Lee Hooker to Muddy Waters. He was becoming more than just a drummer. He was becoming a bluesman. That firing ended up being the start of something much bigger. In April 1967, something small and unexpected changed music history forever. John Mayall gifted Peter Green a bit of free studio time. Green used it to record 5 songs with Mick Fleetwood and John McVie. The 5th track was a simple instrumental. He named it Fleetwood Mac almost as an afterthought. But that September 1969 brought another big change. The album Then Play On signaled their shift into psychedelic rock. It was a bold step away from blues, and it worked. The album reached number 4 in the UK with its lead track Oh Well, climbing to number 2. Danny Sirwin's contributions stood alongside Peter Green's, creating a new sound. Around the same time, the band flew to Chicago to record at Chess Records with blues legends like Willie Dixon, Buddy Guy, and Otis Spann. The mix of blues and psychedelia gave the album an edge that helped define their new direction. Rattlesnake Shake, written by Green, stood out. The album proved they weren't stuck in one genre and could evolve into something much bigger. But then came disaster. In March 1970, Peter Green went to a party in Munich while the band was touring Europe. The party was held at a commune rumored to be part of a cult. Green took LSD there, much stronger than anything he had before. Some think his drink was spiked. He came back changed. According to their manager, Green started talking about money like it was evil. He even wanted to give away all of the band's earnings. Within 2 months, he left the band entirely. He was later diagnosed with schizophrenia and went through electroconvulsive therapy. His departure was a painful loss right when the band was finally finding success. In August 1970, just 10 days before their U.S. tour, Christine McVie officially joined the band. She had retired from music a year earlier after leaving Chicken Shack to focus on her marriage to John McVie, but she had already played on several Fleetwood Mac albums as a session musician. On the Kiln House album, she contributed vocals, keyboards, and even drew the cover art. The album came out in September and marked a turning point. With Christine in the band, they began to move toward a more melodic, mainstream sound. Her presence helped fill the gap left by Peter Green, both musically and emotionally. She later remembered that all it took was one casual question. "Hey Chris, do you want to join?" And just like that, she was in. Then in February 1971, Jeremy Spencer disappeared. He left his hotel in Los Angeles saying he was going to a bookstore. He never came back. The band had a show scheduled at the Whiskey A Go, but Spencer was gone. After 5 days of searching, the FBI finally found him. He had joined a religious group called the Children of God. When the band saw him again, his head was shaved and he had a new name. Mick Fleetwood described him as a zombie who kept mumbling, "Jesus loves you." Spencer said he had been feeling lost, and a street musician invited him to their center. The cult was later labeled as one of the most abusive in American history. Bob Welch was brought in to replace him. Despite losing 2 founding members, Fleetwood Mac kept moving. In September 1971, they released Future Games, their 5th album. It sounded completely different. The blues was gone. Instead, They embraced melodic rock and vocal harmonies. This new direction didn't chart in the UK, but found an audience in America. The single Dragonfly introduced their evolving sound. By the end of the year, CBS released their first greatest hits album in Europe. The new version of the band, now led by Welch and Christine McVie, began building the foundation for future success. In 1972, they are. By 1982, Fleetwood Mac needed a win. Mirage gave them that. Released on July 2nd, it returned them to softer rock sounds and shot straight to number 1. Hold Me stayed at number 4 for 7 weeks. Gypsy hit number 12. Love in Store reached number 22, but the cracks were deeper than ever. Their Mirage tour was much shorter than previous ones, only 29 cities compared to over 100 for the Tusk tour. Lindsey Buckingham was already pulling away. When the tour ended, he was done. He felt disconnected from the band's values and would not return until 1997. His exit marked the beginning of more departures, more chaos, and serious financial trouble. Mick Fleetwood's worst mistake came soon after. In the early 1980s, he bought a 1,000-acre farm in Australia for $3 million. It came with 8 houses and a fishing lake, but he only lived there for 3 weeks before realizing he couldn't handle the lifestyle. He had taken a $2 million advance to buy it and then had to borrow another $2 million after the money ran out. When he tried to sell it, the value had already dropped. The mortgage debt was higher than the sale price. That one bad decision mixed with declining band income led him to file for bankruptcy in 1984. He even had to give up his green card. The man who once made cartloads of money from rumors had lost nearly everything. In 1987, the band put together another hit with Tango in the Night. It featured massive songs like Little Lies. But right before the tour, Lindsey Buckingham shocked everyone. On August 7th, at a meeting in Christine McVie's house, he announced he was quitting. He said he felt unappreciated. The meeting turned into a fight. Stevie Nicks and Buckingham got into a physical confrontation. The next day, he was gone. The band had already signed contracts and couldn't back out. So, they brought in Billy Burnett and Rick Vito to replace him. On the opening night in Kansas City, someone held up a sign that read Lindsey, who fans had already moved on. Then came a strange twist. On April 10, 1990, Fleetwood Mac released Behind the Mask. Buckingham was no longer a member, though he played acoustic guitar on the title track. The new 6-piece lineup had 4 singer-songwriters, but the album barely made an impact in the US. In the UK, it debuted at number 1 and went platinum. It also included one of the first uses of CD+G encoding, letting lyrics and graphics appear on TV screens during playback. After the tour, both Stevie Nicks and Rick Vito left. That same year, the band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The inducted members included both the original late 60s lineup and the Rumors era members. But Bob Welch, who had held the band together in the early 70s, was left out. Things got even worse in 1995. The album Time introduced Becca Bramlett and Dave Mason. Stevie Nicks was absent, and it ended up being Christine McVie's final album as a full member. Released on October 9th, it peaked at number 47 in the UK and didn't even chart in the US. By 1996, it had only sold 32,000 copies. Behind the scenes, it was a mess. Bramlett clashed with Mason constantly. She got angry at him for smoking cigars on the tour bus and sharing inappropriate stories about his personal life. Mick Fleetwood later said that putting that lineup together was one of his biggest regrets. Within a year, it all collapsed. He fired Bramlett via fax after another bus fight. Then in 1997 came a spark of hope. On May 23rd, the band reunited for an MTV special. They recorded the dance live at Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank. It was the classic Rumors lineup once again. The album debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 with nearly 200,000 copies sold in its first week. Within 2 months, it had sold over 1 million. It became one of the top 5 best-selling live albums in U.S. history. But it was also the end of something. Christine McVie left the band the next year. The DVD version of the dance went on to sell over 135,000 copies in Australia alone and was certified 9 times platinum. It was a powerful goodbye to a band that had survived everything from slow beginnings and painful breakups to drug spirals and financial collapse. In April 2003, Fleetwood Mac released Say You Will, their 17th and final studio album. It came 5 years after Christine McVie had left the band. Although she wasn't a full member anymore, she still appeared on a few tracks. The album became a surprise success, debuting at number 3 on the Billboard 200 with 218,000 copies sold in the first week. It was the band's first top 3 album since Mirage in 1982. By July, it had already gone gold in the US with 500,000 copies shipped. In the UK, it reached number 6 and sold over 100,000 copies. Lindsey, Buckingham and Stevie Nicks handled most of the keyboards and worked together in the studio for the first time in 15 years. The single Peacekeeper made it onto the Hot 100 while the title track climbed to number 17 on the Adult Contemporary chart. After this chapter of success, Mick Fleetwood returned to his musical roots. In 2008, he formed the Mick Fleetwood Blues Band with guitarist Rick Vito. Their 2009 album, Blue Again, earned a Grammy nomination for Best Traditional Blues Album. It was a full-circle moment for Fleetwood, whose career began in the British blues scene long before the pop hits. Fleetwood had played with Peter Green, backing legends like John Mayall. This new project let him step away from polished pop rock and back into the raw blues he loved. Rick Vito's guitar blended perfectly with Fleetwood's steady rhythm, creating something both classic and fresh. In 2014, Fleetwood opened up about his past in a revealing memoir titled Play On. The most shocking admission was that he had lost nearly $60 million due to cocaine addiction. By 1984, he was bankrupt, drowning in $3.7 million of debt, more than 1.5 times his net worth. He couldn't work for 2 years, and barely remembered that time. But as he recovered, he branched out. He launched a wine business called Mick Fleetwood Private Cellar that ran for over 14 years. His wines sold in the millions and earned over 10 international awards. At the same time, he explored photography, showcasing hand-painted works in exhibitions across cities like Toronto and Atlanta. In 2012, he opened Fleetwood's on Front Street, a restaurant in Maui. This was a dream he had held on to since.